This is Joshua English for the Alameda County EMS audio podcast.
And whatever answer you come up with, explain it. What's the rationale? What's the justification? What's the ethical issue for getting the heart?
In this episode, I'm back in the studio and back in conversation with Mike Tagman, General Manager of AMR Alameda County. This is part one of a four-part series on ethics in EMS. We start out this series with a story.
When I was a paramedic, I worked as a paramedic for the Denver Paramedic Division, and we were part of the Department of Health and Hospitals. So we were based out of Denver General Hospital, which is kind of Denver's equivalent to Highland. And after working on the streets for a couple of years, I was asked to join the hospital's ethics team. Had no idea what that meant, but of course I agreed because it sounded interesting. I was paired up with two physicians, so it was a three-person team, and it turns out what our responsibility was to make ethical decisions around patient care for the hospital. The first case that I was asked to look into involved transplant, heart transplant. And the way the transplant lists work in Colorado is that, if you need a heart transplant, you need a heart-lung transplant, whatever it happens to be, there's a list, and when you get placed on the list, the next organ that becomes available is yours when you reach the top of the list. And they set it up so that, you can't jump the list, you can't make any changes or anything like that. So there was a young man, 28 years old, long-time IV heroin user, been using heroin since junior high school, and had a bacterial endocarditis, which has put him into profound heart failure, and his heart was not going to recover. So he had risen to the top of the transplant list. The second person on the transplant list was a 34-year-old CCU nurse who had caught bacterial endocarditis secondary to an accidental needle stick while she was working in the CCU at one of the neighboring hospitals in Denver. So we get notified that a heart is going to become available, and the question that was brought to us was, who should get the heart? So part of the process, you go to interview folks. So I went in to sit down next to this young man in his hospital bed in the coronary care unit at Denver General Hospital. And he describes how many times he's tried to get off heroin. He's been institutionalized 6 times for withdrawal and all this kind of stuff. Been in jail a few times. He says when he's been in jail, he's still been able to get heroin, so that didn't necessarily pull him off it. But he as much as he's tried, he's never been able to get off the drug, and he doesn't really want to. But he wants his heart because he wants a chance to live. And when I said, you're aware that if you get a heart during the transplant and you continue to use heroin, there's a potential for you to ruin the heart that you're getting. And he says, I'm aware of that. And I said, are you willing to commit to staying off of heroin? And he said, to tell you the truth, no. He was in the ICU. He'd used twice in the ICU. He'd had friends bring heroin into the hospital during the time that he was there. And the next patient on the list, a nurse, somebody who's been involved in healthcare for a long time, had been taking care of patients with sick hearts. The reason she ended up with the need for a heart transplant was accidental, something that happened on the job. And so the question that came up for us from the ethical perspective is, who gets the heart?
In EMS, we're faced with tough decisions every single day. Rarely do we have a rule book to go by. We're flying by the seat of our pants, and ethical decisions are no different. So again, ask yourself, who gets the heart?
And whatever answer you come up with, explain it. What's the rationale? What's the justification? What's the ethical issue for getting the heart? The way the list is set up, the guy who's been a long time heroin user and will continue to be a heroin user gets the heart. And the reality was that the CCU nurse was sick enough that if she didn't get a transplant quickly, she was going to die in the process. And I've shared this with people, and it's about 50-50 of people saying, the list is created for a reason, so you don't get into making decisions like this. You got to follow the rules. And then on the other hand, other people will say, well, obviously, for the good of society or whatever, the person who is in a position to help people and those kinds of things and is likely to take good care of the heart and live a longer, more productive life should get the heart in this circumstance.
This podcast is not a how-to. It's about the whys and wherefores. It's trying to make you think about the things that we do in the field, the decisions that we make every day. Having said that, Mike does have one easy test that you could use when dealing with these types of situations. It's called the newspaper test.
And that is, if the decision I'm about to make or the action I'm about to take were to show up in the newspaper tomorrow, is it an article that I would cut out, mail to my mom so she can use a magnet, put it on the refrigerator, and show off to the neighbor ladies how bright her offspring is? Or is this an article that would cause me to move to a small country whose name nobody could pronounce and change my name and hope I was never seen or Facebooked again in my entire life? You can anticipate. There's a great book called Stumbling Onto Happiness. Daniel Gilbert, he's a Harvard psychology professor who really talks about our ability to predict how we're going to feel emotionally in the future about an action that we anticipate happening. Mm-hmm. How am I going to feel if I pay off my house, if I earn my bachelor's degree, if I finally get onto the fire department, whatever those kinds of things are. People think how they're going to feel if they accomplish whatever it is. And he really walks through the neuropsychology about how wrong we are. But it's in my mind, it's kind of about, as much as possible, doing what's right. And the challenge is getting clear about what right means.
Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to tackle 3 difficult issues. The first is pain management. The second, using patient restraints. And the third, end-of-life care. Now you may be thinking to yourself, what's the end of the story? Don't worry, we can at least give you that much.
The question people always ask me around this particular case is, so what'd you do? What did you choose?
So what did you choose?
Well, this is cheating. But what happened is a second heart became available. They both got heart transplants.
You've been listening to the Alameda County EMS audio podcast. This is your host, Joshua English. You can download this and past episodes of this podcast on our website at acgov.org/EMS. You can also download our iPhone application, which has access to our county protocols, as well as very important phone numbers to contact our hospitals. Thanks for listening.